What's up, everybody, and welcome into the number one Group of Five college football show in the history of the world. This is the Group of Five guys presented by FanDuel. Our mission is to be the voice for the Group of Five football programs, the voice that the mainstream sports media absolutely refuses to be. We need your help to do that. Hit the follow button on all the social media platforms at Group of Five guys. Go to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Believe Network, wherever you get your best podcasts. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a 5-star rating and a review. Most importantly, tell your family and friends all about us. On this episode of Inside Drill, Boise State Athletic Director Jeramiah Dickey. Can't wait. Enjoy it. Well, guys, long time coming, been requested upon us many times over the last couple years. Finally making it happen. We've got the athletic director at Boise State, Jeramiah Dickey, joining the Group of Five guys tonight. Jeramiah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity. Always will take it to tell our story. So I appreciate you guys giving me some time.
So I got to start it off, and this is probably how this came about. You're one of the more publicly vocal voices, especially from an administrative or, athletic department standpoint, when it comes to CFP arguments or realignment or NIL or all the things that people get worked up about in 2026. Why do you feel like you need to be vocal about these things?
I don't think I was always that way. I transitioned into this role during COVID, and that's really where social media and just using that platform to tell a story started for me. And most recently, and you mentioned a handful of the challenges that we're all facing. And I don't even think you can categorize it as P4 or P2 versus G6 or whatever we want to call it. I think we're all facing a lot of challenges, and being a leader is important, and I owe it to the people I serve, my staff, my student athletes, and my supporters. I care very much about this industry. And I think that's in many ways what we're lacking as an industry is true leadership and putting yourself out there and fighting for what you feel is right. And I never want to come across as a know-it-all or smarter than anyone else, because I'm not. Hopefully I approach it in a very humble and authentic way that I care very, very much about what we represent, and we represent something bigger than ourselves. And I think I've learned a lot through my first 5 years as an athletic director, and I want to take advantage of that, because what I don't want, guys, is to get to the end of this and say shoulda, coulda, woulda. Too much is at stake, and too much that I care about and very passionate about. So I am vocal, and it probably ruffles some feathers, but know it's coming from a good place, and that's my heart.
Well, we love it. I can say that. It comes off as authentic as all can be, and we appreciate that. Why do you think that some coaches and other ADs are maybe a little hesitant to kind of give their opinion out there to the public?
It's a great question. And it's funny, like that actually came up today in a few meetings and earlier this week, as I continue to connect with as many ADs as I possibly can and people in our industry, whether they're an athletic director in a department or a vendor. I don't know. Right now there's not an AD or someone in the industry that I talk to that maybe is fully having fun or not navigating some type of chaos, because of how the industry is operating. And I don't know. I don't know if it's, I'm probably, I'm willing to put myself out there, even in spaces that I don't know everything about. I've been very vocal on collective bargaining, and, I can't tell you all the ins and outs of it, but I can tell you that the lawsuits are going to continue to come until we give them a seat at the table. And so very simply, I'm going to be vocal about it and hope others can speak into it and maybe create the conversation that allows us to make the necessary changes so we quit living insanity, and so maybe that's a little bit of it, because I know who I am. And as I said, I want to be a humble leader in this space. But I do owe it to my people to to continue to bring up some of these things, whether I know everything about it or not. I'm trying to educate myself daily on everything that's going on, and it changes daily. And I'm not sure why more people aren't talking about it, but I feel like the last week, since that white paper came out that the SEC and Big Ten did, I feel like we've seen maybe a little bit of a change. Seeing Louisville come out with what they did, and obviously Cody Campbell, and I know there's good people in this industry, and it's not a judgment on anyone, whether you're in the P2, Power 4, Group of 6, whatever you want to call it. This stuff is hard, and it takes a team, and we're going to have to unite, and we're going to have to figure out how do we get ourselves out of it. And the way to do it is not to continue to dig. The bottom is when you stop, and we have to get the right people in the room, and we have to have these honest and transparent conversations, and we have to do what's right for an industry that has just a dramatic impact on the communities we serve and the student athletes that we're preparing for life.
How do we get out of it and stop digging? From a fan standpoint, and when you read articles and you read clickbait, it seems like, okay, there's two guys that are doing whatever they want, and we're not getting representation from certain conferences or certain athletic departments. And so it sometimes can feel frustrating. Like, what can we do in this fight? And you're vocal about it, but what can we do? What can fans do?
I think fans need to be vocal. I've been, I feel like pretty far out on this limb, for maybe the past year, and trying to draw people into the conversation that communities are being impacted, and everyone has a different runway, and when I know what we represent here, and I can speak more intelligently to Boise State, but we have a national brand, and we have a very short runway. And when you think about the $350 million economic impact that we have on our community and the people that impacts, and as I said, we represent something bigger than ourselves, and that's not transferable to another community that has college football or an FBS program. If we can't continue down this road and continue to compete for championships at the FBS level, for whatever reason, that is going to have an impact, and that's something that it's hard for me to process or to sit on the side and hope, and pray that someone's going to step up and figure this out. And so at minimum, if I can be vocal and drive people and fan bases to unite, we're all in this together. I understand there's a competitiveness, and if we're playing each other, great. Like, we can all hope that one wins and one loses. But right now we're fighting for something so much more than that. We are impacting people, and that's something that's important to me. And I think fan bases should be more vocal. I think many in the industry, and I have to be careful how I say it, but I think many in the industry are overplaying the hand. I don't want to price out my people. The cost of doing business has gone up. I know who I serve here. I know we are blue collar, and I know what the state of Idaho is. And I think many schools can say something similar. And, we can't buy our way out of this. We can't spend our way out of this. We have to create guardrails. We have to be more vocal. Fans have to unite and fight for something, that's worthy. And I think what college athletics represents and why I got into it is our why is so much bigger than what I get paid or my title. I don't think that highly of myself. I'm grateful to work in college athletics and what it does and how it provides opportunities and changes lives, and that's something that, it maybe sounds dramatic, but I believe that, and right now that's getting us through these tough days because I know what's at stake, and I'm hopeful that people maybe use me as an example. I being a leader, this job is challenging on a good day, and putting yourself out there, however uncomfortable it is, I know what the potential outcome could be if we don't. And so I'm hopeful that at minimum, even if people don't like what I have to say, that's okay. I get a lot of those on social. At least it causes conversation, and at least it brings it to the front. And we get into seasons and it gets hidden. You look at after the Indiana's championship, and good for them. But after that, all you heard about was the viewership's up. Like both can be true. People are tuning in, but I also think that there's value that I can talk for my fan base. They're tuning in because they know we potentially have a seat at that table. And if those opportunities are limited, will the viewership still be up? And if we're going to continue to make rules that are good for some and not good for the majority, and really try to hinder the level of competitiveness and access and so on and so forth, I would imagine the viewership will be impacted. And maybe that's a biased opinion because I'm on representing a brand that's on the outside looking in, but I think that a lot gets hidden. And, just like I tell our team here, winning hides a lot. Well, the seasons and the success, and it's great. Like, who doesn't love college football? I mean, it's an important pastime for us as a nation. And so you have these peaks and valleys, and I think we need to take advantage of that, because I know there's a lot of interest. You all shared some of your story with me, and before we jumped on here, and it means something to you, and you guys are trying to provide a platform and be a part of the storytelling, that really drives, maybe some change that we can all look back on and be proud of. And so maybe that's my hope. Maybe that's what I want. I want leaders to step up. I want them to be vocal. If I'm wrong in what I'm saying, then tell me I'm wrong. And let's talk about it. We don't get anywhere by hiding and these deals that are getting done in back rooms and in secret, and all of a sudden we're all finding out on social. That's just not how I want our team to operate. That's not how I want my department to operate, and I don't want our industry to operate that way. Long-winded, guys. I talk a lot, so I apologize.
No,
amazing.
Cool.
Amazing. I was just going to follow up. You mentioned being one of the brands that's maybe on the outside looking in. To transition a little bit, how does the move from the Mountain West to the Pac, you think, impact that? And maybe walk us through just the 30,000-foot view of the conversations that happened to officially make that move this year.
Yeah, my goal is to do my very best to elevate this department, and we're bar raisers. I don't like insanity. Change is inevitable, and I felt like we were making the best decision for us as we sit here today. I say we're on the outside looking in. I know what our brand is. It's national, if not international. I was just having a talk with one of our donors, and he was in New Zealand, and someone came up and said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from Boise, Idaho." "Oh yeah, the blue turf." And like it has power. And I think when as I was going through that process, if I can improve our situation, however much, I'm going to make those decisions. And 99% of the decisions I make on a daily basis, I don't have all the information, and there is no perfection. And so when you're going through something like that, and you can align with like-minded institutions that want to invest and want more, and maybe are in this, purgatory sounds so negative, but this purgatory space that we're not like all Group of Six teams, and we're maybe not like, or not yet, we consider ourselves a Power Five because of what we've done over the course of 3 decades. But we're in this space that every inch matters. And my job is to elevate it. That is my job here, is to do what's in the best interest of Boise State. And that's no offense against the Mountain West. I absolutely love the leadership of Mountain West, and I love who they are and what they represent. And they're all great people. But my job is to do what's best for Boise State. And so as I was looking at it, and aligning with some of the brands, and aligning with those that are investing and want to compete at a high level and want something more, because we all see what's happening in this industry. It used to be, secrets and happening in those boardrooms, and now everyone's pretty vocal, and what happens here for the next 3 to 5 years will forever impact this place for the next 30. And so if I could impact that in a positive way and improve our situation and position by that much, I'm going to take that chance and bet on us, because I have a great team and I believe in what we're doing.
One thing that's always kind of puzzled me is with all the Group of Six conferences, the commissioners athletic directors, why everybody seems to be kind of pulling in their own direction, which I totally get. You have to do what's best for your university and your programs and your athletes. But I do feel like where we've seen the SEC and the Big Ten kind of driving things on a national level with at least the college football playoff, it hasn't seemed like, the group of six has kind of banded together. Like, you know what, we do deserve spots. Like the SEC, you don't need six teams in. I've seen that entire story play out through the regular season. Why are we getting limited just to one spot or two spots or whatever? Like, why have we not seen, in your opinion, more of kind of a, convergence of those commissioners and ADs, or is that happening and we just don't know about it?
I think it's happening to a certain extent. I think initially, and mind you, this didn't happen overnight, right? Like this has been slowly happening over probably 3 decades. You can go back to conference realignment in the 90s and the Southwest Conference and Big 12 and and SEC, I think it added some teams, and it's just a continuation, and it just gets that much more uncomfortable, as we've now gotten into 2026. Unity is lacking. We don't have a true leader, and the NCAA is struggling. I think we all know that, and I'm not blaming it like they're playing the hand of the best of their ability. You look at ADs who report to presidents, who commissioners also report to presidents, and everyone is out for themselves. And I always struggle with this, guys, because like I've had the question of, well, you hurt the Mountain West, or and there's this bifurcated thought process of I got to do what's best for us because that's my job, whether people like it or not. At the same time, I want to do what's best for our industry, and be vocal about some of the things that we're navigating, and hopefully drive that level of unity, that's lacking. I don't blame any conference commissioner, any AD. I get it. I live it every day. These things are hard, when you're talking about what is best. But that's also driving where, hopefully, and I do have a voice as an athletic director, but I think that's also driving, the need for change. We need unity, and it isn't there. And so, why haven't the group of six, I think you're seeing more of that. I think there's been, talk of the group of six ADs that have been getting together, and, and I think in time, like it will be, you'll see more of that, because I think that's what it's going to take. It goes back to your question earlier, what can we all do? Fan bases and departments and conferences, we have to unite. And I've been vocal about this, and it's one thing to put it out on Twitter or X, it's another thing to be on video and talking about it. But, I think there's a reason that Louisville came out with what they did. I don't think it will stop with just the group of six and them being very vocal of we should do our own playoff and break away and whatever. It's easier for them to say that, and I maybe understand why. But we're in the FBS, and there's 136 of us, and it's in our best interest if we unite, and because at some point it will impact the ACC. It's going to impact the Big 12, in my opinion. And it's just my opinion. But if I'm reading the tea leaves, that it's coming, and, we have to get in rooms. We have to, and it's hard. Look, I can say this because I'm an athletic director, but anyone who's leading us, it's like, leading blind cats, and like we're, all type A, and we all want to compete and we want to win. And, so it's challenging to get a all group of ADs, just from a conference standpoint, much less 136, in a room and say, what is best? But I think there's some, maybe bites that we can chew, that would maybe help us as we look ahead. And maybe you start with the group of six and how we got to that place. I think a lot of it was based off fear. These threats have been going on for a while of, people will take their ball and go home. Well, at this point, what do we have to lose? We are looking at an unsustainable model that we are operating insanity daily, and we continue to not learn our lesson. Like I don't know, but that just doesn't seem like a formula for success. And so how do we actively change it, and what can we bite off, that maybe unites us? Like I put out the other day that, like, let's create some unity around agents. We're navigating street agents and, someone's roommate and whoever, that's representing these kids and these contracts that we're signing. Like, well, let's all unite around that. That seems like a good first step. I think there needs to be guardrails. I think we need to create something. Now, not surprisingly, I had a lot of agents in my feed, saying like, oh yeah, that's not going to fix it. And of course, because it's all self-serving. But I think that's what being a leader is. My job isn't to do what's best for me. And quite honestly, the vast majority of stuff I do only makes my life more challenging. Like my job is to lead, and being a leader is hard. And, I do think there's some spaces that we can all unite around, and in time that momentum grows. Let's knock out one thing and maybe it leads to another. And, and we can get to a place that we can all be proud of.
We had several questions from, some fans on socials asking about scheduling. And I had a couple questions about it too. I'll kind of try to lump it all into one, but there's always this narrative. We saw it ad nauseum this past season at the end of the year, when you're talking, whether it's James Madison or Tulane or whoever, of, oh, well, they didn't play anybody. But then you could point at a program like Boise State, where it seems like every year you're getting somebody, Oregon, Notre Dame. And then on top of that, you're getting these big brands from the group of 5 or group of 6. You're getting Memphis and App State, and you're going on the road and they're coming to Boise. How do you schedule? Your scheduling seems like 10 years in advance now. So how does Boise seem to always get those marquee big games that when it's time to look at a resume, you can say, well, I mean, Oregon hits a walk-off field goal at home to beat Boise. So, yeah, they absolutely deserve a shot at this thing. When other programs don't seem to have that luck or skill or whatever, negotiation tactics or what it is.
Yeah, it's not a perfect science. Scheduling used to be, 5-10 years out. Now you're seeing a lot less runway in terms of what that is. And a lot of that has to do with, maybe what some of the Power 4 schools and conferences are doing, that they're honing in on strength of schedule and and wanting to play another Power 4 team in their non-conference and so on and so forth. A lot of them want home games. It used to be easier to get home and homes, the one-offs, like that's what our Oregon series was, and now it's essentially going to them. We had BYU, they joined a conference, and so we got dropped, and they were awesome in the process. I appreciate how they communicated and and kind of knew that was coming, but it's not easy. I think it helps us, and I don't take that for granted, that we have a national brand, that we have, continued success, over 3 decades now, and so I think that helps. I also think that where we're located, and specifically to like Oregon, we've played Oregon State before, now we're in the same conference with them, Washington, those schools that went east in terms of the Big Ten and ACC, they want to try, like, that's gotten lost in this. Like, people want to play in front of their fans. They want to play in front of their recruits and their families, and those student athletes want to play in front of their people, and mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and this cross country deal that we have going on. I think it's actually created some opportunities for us that we can stay closer to home, and they obviously want to stay home, and we have a brand to back it that maybe they should beat us. I do believe sometimes we're showing up with a spoon to a gunfight, when you think about rev share and what we're up against. But we're Broncos, and that's what it means to be a Bronco. We're going to go out swinging, and we'll do some damage with the spoon. I think it's actually helped us to a certain extent, but it's not easy, and I think it's probably going to get more difficult and more challenging. And I don't think, and I think COVID probably opened our eyes to this. I don't think that the years of scheduling 7, 8, 9, 10 years out, when I got here in 2021, I think we had a game schedule in 2035. Yeah, it's pretty insane, because so much can change, and there's always a lot of movement, but I'm grateful. People take my calls, and I have a lot of help in that space, and we have a very specific scheduling formula, and we know that like that Oregon game that you mentioned, that was huge, that CFP year. And those are usually three outcomes when you look at it: you win, you lose, or you barely lose, and two of the three are a positive for us in our space, when you think about what we're up against. And so we're going to continue to do our best and try to drive some of those home and homes, but we have Houston and Cincinnati coming up, home and home. But those were scheduled prior to them joining the Big 12, and so far so good. Like, we still have them scheduled, so I'm grateful for that. Hopefully those ADs aren't listening to this and maybe not realize it yet, but I think those are important games. It's important to the fans. It's important to the student athlete experience, and I want to continue to have those games. I'm great. Like, next year we open up against Oregon. I think they're preseason number one right now, and the way too early preseason polls, which is probably ridiculous, but they're a great program, and they have an unbelievable quarterback, and I'm really excited to play them. We have a history with them, and those are important games for us and our community, and how much Boise and Idaho has grown, over the course of the last 5-6 years, with a lot of people moving in from the West Coast, and so there are definitely opportunities for us.
Is there any of your new conference mates that you're more excited than any that maybe you haven't been to or haven't had a chance to play yet?
I've never been to Washington State. We played them last year, or 2 years ago, I guess. That CFP run, we played them here. I've been there, but I have not been to a game there. So I'm excited about that. That will be fun. Texas State. I grew up in Texas. I almost went to Texas State. It was Southwest Texas State at that point. I'm pretty old now, but fortunately, I got into Texas, and that's where I ended up going. So I spent a lot of time in San Marcos, and I've been to games there. But at this point, I've been around a long time. Like, Notre Dame last year was awesome. Like, that was a bucket list. I'm not an Irish fan or whatever, but like, if you love college football, you can't ask for a better situation. And their staff, guys, they were phenomenal. Gave us tours and really embraced the experience, and they know who they are. They have an unbelievable brand. And that was just a cool experience. And, so there's very few of those where I haven't necessarily, at some school been at one of those places that, is maybe super exciting. And basketball, I'm really excited about the Zags. That's going to be a lot of fun. And we have a lot of Zag connections here. And, obviously my coach used to work there, and one of our previous assistant coaches is there now. And so that will be a fun one. Mark Few, Coach Few's son, is on our basketball staff, and his sister-in-law is on my leadership team. She's awesome. And so there's some family connections. So I'm expecting some fireworks for that one. That will be an uncomfortable one maybe for people, but that makes it exciting. But yeah, it's going to be cool. Like, obviously you saw the flex schedule, and, what the Pac-12 is. And, it's been such a cool process for me to be a part of, we're inheriting a brand, but building out a conference, and I still consider myself a new AD. I know I've been in the chair for 5 years, but every day it's different. So I'm learning so much, and, to be able to unite with those guys and Teresa and build something and really take this approach and philosophy of, we don't have to do what everyone else is doing. Quite honestly, it ties into most of the decisions I make here. If the industry's going left, how do I go right and figure out a better way? And that excites me, and what 26 is going to look like, but 27 could be very different, and 28. And, I think it will drive a lot of fan interest, and obviously that brand is powerful. And so I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Jeff?
No, we appreciate all you do on the socials for the Group of 6, Group of 5, and especially for Boise. You guys have been a perennial blue blood program in our eyes for 3 decades or more. So keep it up.
Yeah,
I appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely. Make another run and be the first Group of 5, Group of 6, Power 3, whatever the heck we want to call it, to win a playoff game or two, so we can quiet the noise a little bit. That's what we're really waiting on. So,
and Boise's on our bucket list, so we got to get
up there 100%.
You guys are always welcome. We have great games the next couple years, and would love to have you. It's I accepted this job sight unseen. As I said, it was during COVID, and so there wasn't a lot. There were travel restrictions and other things in terms of the institution. And I remember everyone I talked to said, "JD, I know you haven't been there, but you'll never want to leave." And it could have been true. Like they were absolutely right. This is an amazing place. My family loves it, and Bronco Nation is awesome, and I'm very grateful and would love to have you guys come in. You would love it. Our stadium is one of the loudest I've been in, and they tailgate with the best of them, and they very much care and bleed blue, and that makes my job that much easier. So I'm grateful.
Love it.
Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. It was incredible. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Go Broncos. And if you ever need anything, let me know.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, man.
Jeff, interesting. He brought up Texas State, because the whole time we were talking to him, I thought, and I should have asked him, I'm surely they know each other, but he reminds me of the president of Kelly Danfus.
Yeah.
A lot. Just in their like broad overview of athletics and college sports and the landscape that we're in right now.
Well, the couple of themes that really hit home for me that we heard from Kelly Danfus was how he knows who he serves, and his role is to serve them.
Yep.
And the type of people they are, and like what his responsibility is to Boise, to that community. Like, Jeremiah gets it. And I appreciate that. And he's one of those infectious personalities that I can see why people want to be around him. They want to talk to him. And I just love that he's so vocal about it. He's like, I may not know everything about this particular topic, but let's talk about it. We'll get more people into the conversation. And I think that's what we are lacking. We need people in positions of leadership, like athletic directors, like conference commissioners, to bring up subjects that may be a little dicey at times, or not the most popular opinion, especially the ones of the elites who kind of control everything. But we need to talk about it. We got to figure out a way through this, because like he said, this isn't it. This is unsustainable. And we got to find a way through this and quit digging the hole further down, because it ain't good where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And the deeper we go down this thing, the worse it's going to get.
Well, and the other thing that stuck out to me, Jeff, of course, I'll toot our horn a little bit, is what he said is like, don't think that this is going to stop with the group of six. The ACC, the Big 12. I mean, how long have we been screaming that tune?
They don't want you guys either, pal. It's just a matter of time before they come for you guys. You saw it some last year.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, Jeff, and he's being humble, because Boise is a very, like, he said, I know what our brand is. He said that a couple of times, and like he was being humble about it, because I think Boise could, flex more, and they probably do in those behind the scene conversations, and that's exactly why they get Oregon to play. That's exactly why they're able to, they get Memphis, they get the home and home with App, they get Notre Dame, even though they got to go on the road. They're able to get those because, right, like he said, the outcome for the group of five or the group of six is, what you win, you lose, or you lose close, and two of the three help you. Where, if you're the Notre Dames or the Oregons, it's like that's a big time win still. You know what I mean? And for 30 years now, you've seen Boise just this sustained level of success, multiple head coaches, multiple regimes, different, and like just they just keep winning.
Yep,
they keep succeeding. But anyway, should have asked him where he's got the Redhawks of Miami in the NCAA tournament. I'm sure he's got thoughts on that too, man.
I got him going all the way, pal.
But we can't thank Jeremiah enough. That was awesome. Been wanting to get some Boise State leadership on the show. So we went to the top of the chain. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just gotta go to the top.
That's it.
And but enjoyed that. Super informative. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, Make sure you subscribe. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the Believe Network, wherever you get your best podcasts. Follow on all the socials at Group of Five Guys. Tell your family and friends all about us.